Hi guys, welcome to this module on if statements, countif functions and the sumif function. First of all, the if function. I'm in cell C2, and in cell C2 you can see an if statement on the formula bar. Every if statement has three elements to it, well, a basic if statement does. The first part of the if statement is the test. The second part of the if statement after a comma is what to do if that test is true. And the third part of this statement is what to do if that test is false. So in this example, I've got some name ranges to look at first of all. So let's just make sure we see where they are. So I've highlighted these sales figures and called those sales. I've also highlighted these bonus figures and called those bonus. So this if statement's looking at the sales figure. So if sales is greater than 21,000, then a comma. If that's true, look at sales and times it by 10%, comma. If it's false, don't do anything. So if I take that formula, at the moment that is false because that is not greater than 21,000, it is equal to. If I change that over to 22,000, it is now true, so it's looking at sales and doing 10%. If I just undo that, it's back as it was, and if I delete that one and just type that out. So start off with equals, if, and then open the bracket. Now as soon as you open the bracket, this small little help appears, and whatever's emboldened is where you are within the statement. So you may think you're somewhere else, but if the computer is showing that bit bold, that's where you're at. So it's wanted to know what the logical test is. So in our example, the test is if sales is greater than 21,000. Now when you type 21,000, don't put any commas, full stops or pound or dollar signs in there, just the figure. Then if I do a comma, it moves across, the help moves across to what to do if it's true. If that is true, I'm doing sales times 10%. Now the next thing is another comma, which will move me on to what to do if it's false. If it's false, it's just 0 in this case because they haven't got a bonus. I close my bracket, click the tick, and I get blank. And then if I change that back to 22 to test it, it flicks over and does the 10%. Just undo that one. Now where it says more effort needed, here's another if statement, but this time I'm putting text in the cell. So what is it looking at? It's looking at bonus. So it says there, if the bonus equals 0, which it does, put this text, more effort needed, in this cell. Otherwise put well done in there. So at the moment, if I tick that, it's saying more effort needed because there is no bonus. So if I delete this one and type it out. Now usually the problem with this one is if equals if. The test is if bonus is equal to 0. The problem with this one is people forget the commas or the quotes. So if bonus equals 0, it means I haven't got a bonus. I open quotes and then I say more effort needed. Close quotes, that's the bit people forget. Then I do another comma and I open quotes again, and if they have got a bonus I want it to say well done. Like that. Close the bracket, click the tick, and it comes back with more effort needed. So if I change that figure again, 22, when I press enter, both of these two yellow cells change over to display the correct information. Now this if statement on the right, where it says overtime, it's not using any names, it's just looking at a cell reference. So it says there, if H2 is less than or equal to 8, no overtime. If it's false, overtime. So in this example it is false. If I change that to 7, it will change over and say no overtime. So it's basically a test, what to do if it's true, what to do if it's false. Now if we have a few practice exercises at that, so this one at the top, status. Create an if statement that will display the words increase or decrease depending whether the 2019 figures have increased over the 2018 figures. Now I'm not going to do is greater than or equals to, I'm just going to do a straightforward greater than. So equals if, open a bracket. So my test is if F5 is greater than E5. That's the test. Then I do a comma. If that is true, I want the word increase to appear. So I'll put the side quotes and then another comma. If it's false, I want the word decrease to appear, inside quotes, close the brackets, and tick, and then I can pull that formula down like so. Now this one on the right is asking me to use names, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to highlight these two columns. I'm going to the formulas tab. I'm going to do create from selection, top row. Okay, so that should have named that one budget, which it has, and that one should be called actual, which it has. Now if I do the if statement now, equals if, open the bracket, so I can type the word actual. If actual is greater than budget, I don't need quotes around those because they're names, comma, that's the test. If you spent more money than you was given in your budget, you must be over budget. Close quotes, comma, otherwise you're within budget. Close quotes, close bracket. Tick that one. Double click that little cross down, widen that a little bit, and move this out of the way. So there you go. I only spent £234, so I'm within budget. Now this one, I want to give a customer 15% discount if they are a new customer. So what I'm going to do here first off is I'm going to highlight these columns and create from selection and just name them. It just makes it a bit easier when you're doing if statements, I think. So I'll go equals if, open bracket. So if, I don't need to click on that, do I? I can just type new. If new equals yes, now I need to put yes in quotes because that's not a name, that's the test, comma, then I'm going to look at that figure, which is the total or the subtotal, and times it by 15%, comma. If they're not new, unfortunately, they aren't getting anything discounted, so I'm just going to leave that as 0. I'll tick that, and I can double click that down. So there's only 2 new customers, 1, 2, and then this is just basically a sum to equals that minus that. Tick, double click that down, and that's the correct answer. So that's 3 examples on this sheet of an if statement. Now the next thing is COUNTIF. On this one we've got 4 examples of a COUNTIF. So first one at the top, I've got it counting how many times it says late. So if I pull late across there, this guy John Smith's late 3 times. So before I actually get into this, I need to just show you a couple of things. I've named each row John Smith. Not each row, the first row John Smith, second row is Dave Jones. So basically each row is named by the person. So when I click onto this yellow cell, it uses the COUNTIF function. It says COUNTIF John Smith is late. You can almost read that in English and understand what's going on. So COUNTIF John Smith's late. That's all it's doing, looking along the line for the word late. The line is called John Smith. If I had not have named it, it would have been a cell range, so it would have been C5 to I5. But I like to use names in my formulas, so that's why I've done that. Now if I delete that one off and type it out, delete, so it's equals count if, open the bracket, It wants the range. It's looking for the range there, look. The range is John. I have to start typing it. I can double click on John Smith. Then it needs a comma, comma. Now what's the criteria? Criteria is the word late. And with text, same in an if statement, I need to put it inside quotes and then close my brackets, John Smith's late. Count if John Smith's late, tick. And then that's how it works. Pulls it across. If I pull him across a bit more, so he's really bad, he's late 5 times. The one below this one, this is a count if function looking at a list. It's looking at B13 to B16 and C to see how many times there is a figure over 50. So I just tick that. So in this list there are 2 items, 1, 2, that are over 50. So it's quite a strange one. This one you have to put quotes around the figure, which normally you wouldn't do. But let's just type it out so you can see how it works. Equals count if. I'll just use the range this time. The range is that, comma. Then I need to open quotes and then do the greater than, in this case was 50, and close quotes. So anything that's in that list that's over 50, count it. And there are 2. If I change that to 55, there'll be 3. Now this one over here where I've got pass and fail, I've called this blue area status. And then basically the count if function is looking down status to find what's in J1. So in J1 is the word pass. So it's counting how many passes there are. And if I pull a few passes down, like so. And then this one is counting the same list, status, but looking at K1. So if I just delete those 2 off, and just type equals count if in there. Count if status, comma, click on the criteria. So I could have put the word pass in quotes, but I like to do it like that with a little cell reference. Close the brackets, click the tick, comes up with 4, pull it across. Because I'm using names, I don't need to worry about $signs. It just pulls it across. The J1 moves across to K1, which is what I want it to do. And then the last example of this count if is this one, where it says not complete. So this is an if statement with a count if inside it. So it says if count if F14 to J14 is yes, or equals y, or is y, and that equals 5, the total of that equals 5, so it's going to count that first, how many y's there are. If that equals 5, this is complete, otherwise it's not complete. So if I change that to y, complete. Any of these not complete, it will say so. So basically, if countif function returns anything other than 5, it will say not complete. And let's have a little go on an exercise. So this exercise wants to look along each row and find how many items are over 50. So it's equals count if, select the range, I've not named it so I'll have to select it, comma, and then this is where the quotes come in again, greater than 50, close quotes, close brackets. There are 9, pull it down for each row and it gives you the scores on the doors. That's the countif function. And the next one is the sumif function. So the sumif function, as opposed to counting how many items, is adding up a total. So basically, if I explain what I've done here, so column C I've named as location, column E I've named as students, and then I've done the sumif function. So basically, look down location for whatever's in G1, G1 says C&A retailers. If you find C&A retailers in the location column, add up the students. So if I put some more students in there, 22, that will add them up. Just undo that. So if I delete this off, so I'll start again, equals sum if, open bracket. It's asking me for the range, so I'm looking down location. Look down location. What are you looking for? I'm looking for C&A retailers, which is in cell G1, comma. What do you want to add up? I want to add up students. Then I'll close my brackets. I'll click my tick, get the 27, and because I've used names, I again don't need to use dollar signs, so I'll just pull that across. And then once you've done this and set this up, any of these changes will be reflected as soon as they are made. Let's have a little go at the exercise. So I've got categories for food and electric or household spend really. I want to know how much I spent on gas, how much I spent on food, petrol, electricity and insurance. So I'm going to use the sum if function. Here's my list of costs. I have named this column item and I've named this column cost. So I'll go equals sum if, open the bracket. I'm going to look down item for, so I've done a comma there, for gas. So if I didn't have it set up like this, I would have to put the word gas in quotes, comma, and then I'm going to look down the column called cost, close my bracket, and click the tick. And then again, because there's names, I don't need to use dollar signs to lock anything. I can just pull that across. And then I quickly put a chart on that. There's my little chart. And maybe I want to spend on there. Add data labels. My spend. Okay, so that's the end of sum if. So we've looked at basic if, we've looked at count if, we've looked at sum if. All of them are very, very useful and flexible functions. In this module, I want to look at ifs, nested ifs and a comparison, average ifs, count ifs and sum ifs. So first off, ifs. Now I've got an example here where I've got an if statement at the top there where you can see if status equals red, you want it to say bad. If status equals yellow, you want it to say pending. And if status equals green, you want it to say good. So this is the status on these tasks. Whatever you put there, it will reflect it on the ifs statement. So let's just replicate that to the right. If I just type equals ifs, when you open the bracket, the little test comes on you. So the first test is, I've called this status, but I could just click on B2. So I'll say status, so it should pick it up and name range. Status is equal to red in quotes. If that's true, comma, that's going to be bad. So you put bad in quotes as well. And then it's the next one. So if status equals yellow, that needs to be in quotes as well, yellow, comma, and that's pending, so you put pending inside quotes, and then a comma for the third one. So status equals green in quotes, then comma, that is good. So an ifs statement is a lot simpler than a nested if, which predated it, which I'll show you in a second. So if I just double check this, click tick, and it just fills it down. And then if you change any of these statuses, change that to yellow, it should change that to pending. So see how that sits at the top there? Just fairly straightforward. There's the criteria, what to put if the criteria is true, and all the way along, and only one closed bracket. Now if I show you a nested if example on this sheet, so first of all, this area, these scores, I've named those score, and then this is how it works. You start off with just the if itself, no s. It says there, if the score is greater than 98, give them an A. Now normally on an if you would have a negative next, but on a nested if, you just put another if statement in there. So if the score is 90, give them a B. If it's 75, greater than 75, give them a C. If it's greater than 65, D. All the way along, greater than 50, give them an E. And then it's got a comma fail at the end. So if they don't get greater than 50, they're failing. Now the difference between this one and the ifs is that you then have to close all these brackets at the end. So you've got open bracket there, open bracket, open, 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 5 open brackets. So you need to put 5 closed brackets at the end. And if I change that figure there to 78, it works. Now you also have to have this in some sort of logical order. So I couldn't put the first figure as 50 and then the next figure as 70 because it would just stop on the first one. So this example has to be in descending order for it to work how you would want it to work in a scoring system. So that's a nested if. Now average ifs. This is an example where I've got some figures set against north, south, east and west, and I want to know the average for the north. Just got a little drop down list there, or south, or whichever I select at the top. I want to know the average of figures that are greater than 0 but less than 1,000. So none of those figures are over 1,000 at the moment, so it's going to pick everything that's to do with the south and it'll give you that list. So now this is slightly different. So you've got an average range, which in this case is the figures in column A, average range, and then your criteria range in this case is the north, south, east, west range. And then you are getting it to look at cell D1, which is this cell where the south is at the moment, and then the criteria is greater than 0 and the criteria is also less than 1,000. So if I just try and do that one, so it's equals average if, that one. So the average range is this one, comma, followed by the criteria range, which is this one, comma, by the first criteria, which is D1, comma, and then you're now going down this list again, wants to be greater than 0, so I'm just going to put that in quotes, greater than 0, and it also wants to be less than, in quotes, 1,000, close quotes, close bracket. So that's the criteria. And then in this case, you've got it not set to pounds. I'll just set this to pounds or dollars, whichever you want. They're both looking at the same cell. And you can see that's how that works. You can use cell references for criteria. You can have multiple criteria. You don't have to stop with 2. And sometimes you don't need the second list. You don't always need a criteria list. But in this example, we did. So that's how that would work. And then the next one along is countifs. So in this example, so you're counting how many items there are. This list is called post name. This list is called company. And what you have over here are some drop down lists. So data validation, that is, these are just basic data validation lists. If you don't know how to do that, I'll just type them in for this example, but you can select a list as well. So if I select a IT support manager and a company, it tells me how many there are in that company, 2. So the countifs works like this. Countif post name is equal to F2 and company is equal to G2. So I'll just type this one out underneath so you can see that. So it's equals count ifs. Then the criteria range is going to be post name. So post name, countif post name, comma, is this IT support manager. So it's F2, comma, and company, comma, is equal to G2, whatever goes in G2. So post name is equal to F2, company is equal to G2. Close the bracket, click the tick, comes up with the right number 2. There you go, you just change them over and then that'll count them for you. There's no operation managers in Bead Brown. Ready go, I think it is. Yeah. So that's countifs, and then the last one is sum ifs. So in this one, this column is called company or companies. This column is called pass, and this is called fail, and this is called tutor. So at the top there, I've got a drop-down list with the tutors and a drop-down list with the companies. So if I select a tutor, Jones, and the company, Atmos or Amos, it tells me how many people passed that or failed that. So that's sum ifs as opposed to countifs. So if I type that underneath, equals sum ifs, open the bracket, the first thing you have to do is sum the range. So I'll do the passes, so we're summing the passes, comma. So the criteria range is, first one is tutor, so if tutor, comma, is equal to whatever goes in cell I2, comma, and company is equal to whatever goes in cell I3, I'm just going to put I3 there, it's picking up a name range there, so just type I3 in there, and then close the bracket on that, click the tick, comes up with the same figure as that. Now at the end there, I've just got a little trend line in there, a little spark line, that's what that is. So if I pull this one across, that'll just be a duplicate of that, and I can pull it across because I've used names, I don't need to worry about dollar signs. And then if you want to do a spark line, it's next to the graphs. Quite a few people get this in the wrong place, so I want the end to go there, and then I click OK, and it puts the spark line in there for me. And then you can tick these boxes if you want. You can change it to be a different type, but that's basically what that is at the end there, spark lines. Now these, to delete these, you can't just press the delete key because these are like in the background of the cell, a bit like when you make a cell yellow, for example. If I press delete there, it doesn't delete the yellow, I have to clear it. Likewise with the spark line, you have to clear. So that's the end of this session, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for your time.